We have a bombshell piece in the Politico just a couple days ago that has a Democrat pollster warning about Kamala Harris's lead, and we're going to read it right now. We're going to get into it. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so in the right-hand corner. Please comment and please like. So let's get straight to it. This is a huge piece in Politico, and it talks about how there are a lot of Democrats who are getting a little overconfident with what's going on in this election, and the polling may suggest that Kamala is doing well. But when you look at the historical polling, which we will get into a little bit later, it points to a much different race. And this Democrat pollster believes that and explains that in the piece. Let's go through it. The headline in the Politico: Democrat pollsters have a warning about Kamala Harris's lead. Burned by the numbers that were too rosy in 2016 and 2020, Democrats are holding their breath as Harris surges against Donald Trump. The Democrat Party's pollsters have spent the last 3.5 years preparing for the next 75 days. The last presidential election was an oh shit moment for them. Biden beat Trump by a closer margin than a lot of the polling suggested, and Democrats were projected to expand their House majority, but instead saw it shrink. Now, I will caution that if you go back to 2022, that was one of the few times where Democrats actually outpolled what they were looking like they were going to do. Remember, you're hearing about the red wave, you're hearing about a huge Republican surge that did not materialize in 2022. So keep that in mind. But every single time Trump has been on the ballot, he has overpolled. He is notoriously underpolled. I tell my subscribers all the time, whenever I see a poll with Donald Trump in it, which is every poll, I always tack on 2 points. If he's polling at 45%, it's 47, 47, 49, and so forth, because there are so many people who still to this day may not admit to pollsters that they're voting for Trump. There's also the hidden Trump voters, which Kellyanne Conway talked about a lot in the 2016 campaign. Basically, Trump voters, not who were too shy to admit it, but Trump voters who weren't the typical Republican voter you may think of. In 2016, that was kind of blue collar, white working class. I think this time around it might be younger, especially young men under 30. So let's get back to it. It prompted 5 of the party's top polling firms, who typically compete for business, to collaborate on an autopsy aimed at fixing what went wrong. So now that Kamala Harris has caught up to Trump in the polls in her first month as a candidate, it's left Democrats wondering how real is her surge. Here at the Democrat convention this week, some in the party's professional class are trying to tamp down the exuberance. Officials with the top pro-Harris super PAC said their polling is much less rosy than public surveys. So for those who don't know, the Harris campaign, just like any other campaign, has their own internal polling, just as the Trump team has their own internal polling. And one of the ways you can tell how that internal polling is going is where are they spending money? Where are they campaigning? If they're sending more money to a state and they're buying up ads in a certain swing state, that means they're worried about that state. If they're pulling out of another state, that means maybe either they've given up on it or they think it's safe. So the piece continues. Other Democrat pollsters noted that even if their polling is right, Trump still maintains a lot of advantages. It's still a very tough race, and that feels consistent with everything we know, said Margie O'Mara, a partner at the Democrat polling firm GBAO Strategies. There are plenty of warning signs hidden in the data. A poll commissioned by the Democratic messaging firm Navigator Research unveiled during the convention showed Harris and Trump essentially tied across the swing state map, and the candidate characteristics that are best correlated with voters' preferences, whether a candidate is up to the job, has the right vision, and is a strong leader, generally favored Trump in the survey. So this points to everything I've been talking about on my live streams and elsewhere. I even went on the Mark Halperin podcast and talked about this, how the average voter is not necessarily looking at the intricacies of policies, tax policy, immigration policy, foreign policy. They're more looking at generic questions like what you just saw here, whether a candidate is up for the job, has the right vision, and is a strong leader. That strong leader one, if I'm a pollster, I am polling that every single day and multiple times a day, because that is the greatest indicator of performance in an election. Strong leader, whenever there's a poll and a candidate is leading in strong leader, they are typically going to win that election. You can look back and see in previous polls. Polls underestimated Trump in both 2020 and 2016. Back in 2021, when the Democrat pollsters announced their joint effort, some had hoped that the former president's hard-to-measure appeal would be negated if he wasn't on the ballot in 2024. But he is, of course. And by the way, that's why they tried so hard to take him off the ballot. That wasn't in the piece. That's my opinion. And pollsters across the spectrum are still grappling with making sure polls are correctly measuring his support. It's very difficult to measure Trump's support. I spent a ton of time and analysis trying to dig into these problems, and I feel much better educated about these problems, said Nick Gorovich, a partner at Global Strategy Group and a driving force behind the post 2020 Democrat polling autopsy. I don't think there's any pollster in America who can sit here and say that they're 100% sure that they've fixed any issues in the polling. I think that would be silly. So they're clearly worried that no matter what kind of scientific model they've conjured up, Trump is such a rogue and uncharacteristic and idiosyncratic candidate that they are afraid there is support for him that they simply cannot measure. And that's all throughout the country. One major part of the effort was a lengthy experiment in the swing state of Wisconsin. The goal wasn't to predict the result of an election, it was to see which voters could be captured by a months long survey using multiple ways of finding people, including a door to door component, and how that group differs from the voters reached in the typical phone or web surveys conducted over the first few days. The main findings: standard polls capture voters who are more engaged with politics and consider it more important to their identity. The reason this is important: there are so many people who vote for Trump who are low propensity voters. What are low propensity voters? They're people who, it's not that they never vote, but they might vote and then they take 2 election years off and then they vote again. They are only voting if there is a candidate who engages them. An example of this would be many people who came out to vote for Obama in 2008 but didn't vote in 2012 because Romney or Obama didn't appeal to them. And then they came out to vote for Trump in 16 and maybe they didn't vote in 2020. But now, if they're ginned up and energized and the Trump message is getting to them, these low propensity voters may come out once again. But in a presidential race, when low propensity voters also turn out, that could be an issue. At the kind of time, effort, and expense that went into getting those voters to participate isn't scalable in a fast changing election. You can't recreate the Wisconsin project in the heat of the campaign, O'Mara said. Polling is still a challenge. Harris's candidacy has significantly changed some of the campaign dynamics, but Democrat pollsters interviewed here are cautious about upending all of their assumptions about the race, like turnout models, after only a few weeks. We very carefully discuss when we're going to change our assumptions due to events, and we look at lots of data rather than letting a single poll dictate how we're going to change things, said Gurovich. We need to see things shift across many polls before we're going to change some of those things. So for now, despite the palpable sense of renewed hope throughout the convention, most elected and professional Democrats are trying to temper their enthusiasm. So they are clearly having a PTSD moment from 2016 where the polling was way off. And people forget this too, but in 2020, the polling was off as well. They expected Biden. There were many polls which showed Biden up by a lot, like 7, 8 points. That did not materialize. He just squeaked away with it. And again, certain amount of votes in those particular swing states. The piece continues. Like the polling firms, House Democrats launched their own autopsy following a disappointing election cycle in 2020, which I just mentioned. Though the party retained control, its majority shrunk, a narrowing that set the stage for Republicans to flip control of the chamber 2 years later. The Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee's post-2020 report found larger than expected numbers of low propensity GOP voters turned out, giving Republican candidates an unforeseen boost. I have made this argument since 2015, since Trump first ran, that he was bringing people out who don't typically vote. There are apolitical people who will vote for Donald Trump, who will not vote for Ron DeSantis, not vote for Marco Rubio. And that was the case I made. I could even make the case, even if I wasn't a biased opinion about what the outcome would be. Even if I were a Democrat, I would say my advice to Republicans is to run Trump because Trump always brings out these voters. And sure enough, they nominated Trump. It is a piece of information that can be really helpful. Absolutely, she said, downplaying the role of polling in the committee's strategy decisions. It's just another input we have that campaigns have. Democrat pollsters have spent nearly 4 years trying to fix what went wrong last time, but they warn there might still be some other issues. The polls could again underestimate Trump this year, though it might be for some other unknown reasons. Every year we've had different curveballs. This is a difficult industry, said John Anzalone, who is the lead pollster on Biden's 2020 campaign. Something's going to happen in 2024. You and I right now don't know what that is. So this piece clearly shows that As many polls as we see every day, and I read them off and I report them, and I will continue to do so, you cannot look at a poll and take it as gospel because polling has flaws, and those flaws have been really, really um, out there for everyone to see in the past 8 years. Not only was 2016 wrong, 2020 was pretty wrong as well. And they're worried that this is the type of candidate in Trump who is so unpredictable, not just on the campaign trail, but so unpredictable in how he's going to perform. There are certain states where he just did incredibly well in 2016 that nobody saw coming. In 2020, and I keep harping on this, I remember there was a poll that had Trump down 16 points, either 14 or 16 points to Biden in the state of Wisconsin. Biden ended up winning Wisconsin by 1 point. That poll was 15 points off, and it was a very reputable poll. I also want to show you this, and I'm going to share this from Brittany Ray on Twitter. I've seen this screenshot circulating, but I just saw it tonight. This is a 538 polling average in August. So this is where the polling average for 538. Nate Silver used to work for 538. He does not anymore. He has his own website, which we quote very often. But this is the 538 polling average at this time in the election in 2016. Hillary was leading by 6 points. She ended up winning the popular vote by 2 points. In 2020, at this time, Biden was up by 7 points. He ended up winning the popular vote by, I believe, 3 points or 4 points. And now Harris is up by 2. So if we follow that same logic, this points to Trump actually either being tied or up in this race, which is very, very bad news if you are a Democrat. You're looking at these polls, you're seeing Kamala Harris up by 1 or 2. This is when she should be peaking. The convention is over, and Trump is still right on her tail. And that is going to continue, if not improve, for Trump as we get into the debates and things start to tighten up as election day approaches. Thank you all for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be doing videos almost every day. I'm doing live streams, polling updates, poly market updates. Let's check it real quick just before we go, where the poly market is right now. And the poly market forecast is 50 to 49. So nothing has changed since we checked it last. This has been seesawing back and forth. Nobody's really taken a huge lead, but Trump right now currently in the lead in the poly market betting odds. Once again, thank you all for joining. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. For those who have already subscribed, thank you so much. Please like, please comment, please let me know what you think. Let me know if you think I'm wrong, right, or whatever. Let me know in the comments. I will read the comments. I will reply to them. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time. God bless.